Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to part 2 of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In our last presentation, we talked a little bit about how the Japanese and Americans were friends during the 1920s, how Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931, which was America's friend, by the way. We talked about how the US stopped trading oil with Japan, which made the Japanese very angry. We talked about the events of December 7th, 1941, when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese, destroying much of the US's navy. And we talked about the US island hopping its way closer to Japan. We also touched upon how the Germans and the Japanese tried to develop atomic bombs, the process of dividing an atom in half and releasing a great amount of energy. Luckily, the Nazis and Japanese didn't get their hands on an atomic weapon. The United States was testing weapons of its own. On July 16th, 1945, the US conducted the very first successful atomic bomb testing. It was called the Trinity Test, and it was part of something called the Manhattan Project, which was a very, very secret plan in order to develop a nuclear weapon for the United States. So on July 16th, the US attempted and successfully tested a nuclear weapon. It was called the Trinity Test, and the picture of which can be seen on your screen. Many of the scientists didn't think it was going to work, but when it did, they got an image that looked like this very, very gigantic explosion. The image that you see here is about 300 meters across. That's about 3 football fields, and that's in the span of less than a quarter of a second. The heat that was released was about as hot as the core of the sun, and it let out a shockwave that created hurricane-force winds. So the US was able to create this Trinity test, or this atomic bomb, through this Trinity test. And at this point, in 1945, the US had to make a decision. By this time, Germany had surrendered, and Japan was really the only Axis power left. So the US had 2 options. The first option was to use atomic weapons to force Japan to surrender. The second option was to invade Japan using ground and air forces with the help of the Russians, who at this time had no one else to fight because Germany was already out of the war. So the US had island hopped all the way to Japan, and by August of 1945, they had decisions to make here. The atomic bombs, they know the power of them, and they were hoping to force Japan into submission. On the flip side, using ground forces would be a more conventional way of defeating the Japanese, but at the same time, many of the United States, Japanese, and Russian troops would have been killed in the process. Obviously, the United States on August 6th decided to drop the atomic bomb on the industrial city of Hiroshima. President Truman, the man who we heard from in the first part of our video, he decided to drop the bombs, first one on Hiroshima. It was an industrial city, meaning that it made a lot of the materials necessary to fight the war for the Japanese. You can look at a video of this attack on YouTube, very easy to find, but it was truly devastating, and I encourage you to watch that video. Japan did not surrender after August 6th. They did not want to back down. Of course, it is within the Japanese code of Bushido that they do not surrender. So on August 9th, 1945, just 3 days later, President Truman decided to drop a second bomb on the city of Nagasaki. After that bomb was dropped, Japan finally surrendered, ending World War II for the United States and effectively the rest of the world. So it took 2 bombs to make Japan surrender. Today, nuclear weapons are still prevalent in our society. If you take a look at the countries in black, these are countries that have nuclear weapons. You could see the United States, Russia, China, India, France, and Great Britain all have nuclear weapons, along with North Korea. Countries that don't have nuclear weapons are shaded green. These include much of Africa, South America. These countries do not have weapons. Countries in red are protected by the countries who have nuclear weapons, the countries in black. So if there was some sort of horrible hypothetical war that took place where nuclear weapons were used, let's say that Canada was attacked by the Soviet Union or Russia today, America, who is allied with Canada, they're friends with Canada, they would help them out. which again is kind of a scary possibility knowing that so many nuclear weapons are up for grabs. Countries in pink, they're a little harder to see, but those are countries that used to have nuclear weapons that don't anymore. And of course, countries in gray, which aren't shown on our key, are countries where it's not entirely sure if they have nuclear weapons, also a scary possibility. But from this presentation, we want to know that the United States at the end of World War II had two options: to either invade Japan or to drop atomic weapons on its major cities. The US opted to drop the nuclear bombs on Japan, which ended the war, but today we have nuclear weapons that are in our world, and of course, the United States was the first and only country to use those weapons in warfare. I hope you learned a lot. If there's anything that you're unsure, you could definitely rewind this video and take another look. But otherwise, great job. Hope you learned a lot. See you later.